Well, good evening. It looks like we're going to be a very small, intimate group here today. I almost feel like we should just bring all of our seats up here on the stage and sit together and talk about mountains. But I do encourage you to please come forward. And I think we've got a very, very interesting set of speakers tonight. And I'm looking forward to learn more about mountain issues from this distinguished panel that we have here. We've got, I think we're competing with a concert tonight, which I think is one of the things that is slowing down our attendance. So it is my honor to open this session on implementing the 2030 Agenda and Paris Agreement in Mountains, building a framework for action. We've got until about 8 o'clock, and we've got a distinguished panel here who will be speaking both from the perspectives of civil society, but also from governments on issues related to the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement. So, Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to start this session. So, on behalf of the Mountain Institute and the Mountain Partnership, it is really quite wonderful for me to address and moderate this official side event, which has been requested by the government of Kyrgyzstan and the International Climbing and Mountain Federation. I am the executive director of the Mountain Institute, which is an international NGO working on mountain sustainability in different regions of the world. We are honored to chair the steering committee of the UN's Mountain Partnership. Today we have a very full agenda, and I will be introducing our speakers in turn, so please hold your questions and comments until right at the end of the event. In essence, we're here to raise the level of attention to the plight of mountain people, who are among the hungriest and the poorest in the world, and to mountain ecosystems that are among the most vulnerable to climate change. Mountains are the essential water towers on every continent. They provide between 60 and 80% of the fresh water resources that over half of humanity relies on every day. But climate change threatens their ability to provide water and other ecosystems, goods, and services for billions of people downstream. Glaciers in mountain ranges around the world are disappearing due to atmospheric temperature increases. Experts predict that for every degree of warming in the lowlands, mountain regions will warm an average of 1.8 degrees. At least 600 glaciers have disappeared over the past decades, affecting water supply and increasing risks of glacial lake outburst floods, drought, and landslides. Climate change, climate variability, and climate-induced disasters, combined with political, economic, and social marginalization, is increasing the vulnerability of mountain people to food shortages and extreme poverty. It's shocking that 1 in 3 of mountain people, of the people living in mountain areas, are at risk of going to bed hungry every night. Unfortunately, there remains limited awareness and international response to the impacts of climate change on mountain regions. I myself suffer a little bit of envy for the attention, despite the many challenges that both oceans, tropical forests have managed to capture, although there clearly are urgent needs as well. Mountains do not receive the attention they need for the services they provide humanity. The Paris Agreement, despite a lot of lobbying efforts, advocacy, made no specific references to mountains, nor the impact of climate change on these fragile ecosystems. The threats to mountain people and ecosystems are growing daily due to both climate change and a range of unsustainable development trends. These include massive outmigration from high mountains, but also in-migration in lower regions from climate refugees. Some of the trends are going to worsen in the future. There is an urgent need to place mountain ecosystems and people at the center of international negotiations, policy, and investment, to ensure that the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda does not neglect mountains and their peoples, which are being left behind. You, as delegates to this COP, have a key role to play. This meeting shares lessons and an opportunity to discuss ways we can work together to advance sustainable mountain development through the 2030 Agenda and Paris Agreement. Today, Mountain Partnership government members, led by the government of Italy, along with NGOs and other civil society organizations, are working together to launch a framework for action at the upcoming Global Mountain Partnership meeting on 11 December in Rome at FAO. And you are all invited to join this meeting at the highest political levels. My colleague, Grammenos Mastrojeni from the government of Italy and the vice chair of the Mountain Partnership Steering Committee, who will be joining us in a little bit, will be reviewing this declaration. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Djyparkul Bekkulova from the who's the head of the Ecological Strategy and Policy Department of the State Agency for Environmental Protection and Forestry of Kyrgyzstan, who will discuss the place of mountains in the Sustainable Development Goals. And my suggestion in the interest of efficiency is that the speakers remain seated and speak from their places. So we'd need to pass the microphone. Would she rather come to the podium? Yeah, then please do.
I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to represent the Kyrgyz Republic government at the UNFCCC COP side event for delivering the keynote speech on importance of our collaborative efforts as a group of mountain countries with shared interest. I am happy to see and thank the representatives of highly mountains as well as many other non-mountains of downstream countries for coming to our side event. We live in an extremely interconnected world today. Our audience for today's events clearly indicates for this. Despite our political boundaries, we are even more interdependent and interconnected. From recent natural calamities happened in North America and refugee crisis all over the world, we see that we collectively as humanity are getting externally to changing climate and human mindset collective being our common threats. We learn that in the accommodation and globalized world of our that no country is immune from climate change, natural disasters and economic menace. The future we want can be higher, healthy, socially inclusive, and just and environmentally sound. Having the CDGs and this abbreviatures ambitious goals to bring the humanity and our development partner to country new lift should be possible, especially given the good results we achieved with the MDGs. With the MDGs, the world saw considerable and member of poor people, people going hungry and living no access to basic cereals. Each and every one of us aspire for a better future. As such, the CGGs are our collective aspirations for better world, and each and every one of us are connected to this in terms of our human right to better the end opportunities and be considerate of future generals' needs. The slogan of the CGGs, leaving to one behind, it's talk of its social dimensions of inclusion. Each and every one of us as government representative for several countries are occupied with our economic development challenges and complete honors for property application and social provision services. And this including, I want there is a need for mounting countries to change the way we work in this era of global changes and commodity by changing ourselves, by encouraging cross learning and effectively using the regional cooperation mechanism to get linked to global process and having one voice as a group of countries with specific interests and needs. In order to work differently, the government of the Kyrgyz Republic proposed to form a new alliance of or chapter of mountain countries joined by our traditional partners and enriched by joining of other interested parties. The benefits of the proposed alliance as envisaged by include consideration of efforts and have one voice for mountain countries. As our response to rapidly changing worlds. Undertake proactive lobbying using the UN PRs of relevant countries. Increase cooperation the mainstream mountains in all relevant areas using existing channels, mechanisms and international institutional structure, UN bodies, global partnerships, platforms and other. Undertake awareness, raising work at all levels. I hope many of you will support our initiative and join us. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry for my bad English. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, our next speaker I'm delighted to say, is Ambassador Isauro Torres, who is Ambassador and Director of Environment and Ocean Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Chile. And he will be discussing a very exciting initiative, which is the Andean Initiative, which I think shows a real pathway for other regions around the world. And so please, here you go.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I know that this has been streamlined, so at least I'm speaking also to the representatives of my initiative. So delighted to see all of you, and if you happen to be in the screen. So hola Alejandra as well. No, Andrew, just to mention that we are very happy and delighted to be joining this side event. Indeed, it's a way of encouraging and really putting the focus on the mountains in the COP agenda. As you mentioned, regrettably, it's not in the agenda, and I hope that perhaps for COP24, we might have a side event fully crowded. And but indeed, using my other hat, because I deal with ocean affairs, also we are trying to promote oceans to put them on the center stage of COP23 and including them on the NDCs. So we know well how difficult it becomes when such a relevant environment it's left, I wouldn't say left behind, but indeed affected by other challenges. And this year, obviously, oceans and the ocean thematic has the advantage that Fiji is running the COP, and it's putting forward an ocean pathway this coming Friday. So perhaps one day we might have our mountain pathway within the COP. But anyhow, allow me briefly to make an introduction. I'm speaking on behalf of, as a coordinator, a current coordinator of the Mountain Andean Initiative. And so I would very much like to provide you a very brief introduction into the Andes, if you allow me. Well, obviously, allow me to use my glasses. There we have a picture of the mighty Aconcagua. That is indeed, it's the highest mountain in the world outside the Himalayas with 7,000 meters. And also I would like to highlight that the Andes includes the world's highest volcanoes as well, such as Ojos del Salado. As a matter of fact, most of the Andean peaks are volcanic. So let me change the slide. This is a brief description of the Andean mountains. The Andes are approximately 7,000 kilometers long and are the world's longest continental mountain range, running parallel along the entire western edge of South America. The mountain range runs north to south through 7 countries, from up north, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. The location, it's the location of several high plateaus, some of which they host major cities, such as Quito, Bogota, and La Paz, to mention the 3 that they are the capitals of their respective countries, and also other cities like Medellin and Arequipa and Santiago that is in the foothills of the Andes. Indeed, the Andes, they cover 33% of the South American territory, and they account for roughly around 85 million people living in our continent. It hosts one of the highest concentrations of biological diversity on Earth. Let me just mention that there are 600 different species of mammals, 400 species of fishes, 1,700 types of birds, and over 30,000 species of endemic plants. And if we attend to a climate definition or division, we have the tropical Andes up north, we have the dry Andes in the center, and the wet Andes in the south part of the continent. But normally we would speak of southern Andes, talking about Chile and Argentina, and the central Andes, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia, that by definition they are called the Andean countries, and the North Andes comprising Colombia and Venezuela. The mountain environments, they do provide a wide range of ecosystem services, from the cycling of nutrients, water and greenhouse gases, to disease regulations and protection from landslides and floods. The Andes, it does contain a wide spectrum of microclimates and ecosystems, such as glaciers, high mountains, grasslands, mountain forests, wetlands. The ecosystems in the most tropical part of the Andes up north and along the eastern slopes have a particularly diverse and populous wildlife. But the whole region is one of the biodiversity hotspots most vulnerable to climate change, partly due to its low interannual variability, which means that ecosystems are not adapted to long-term climate variability. There is an outlook of climate change adaptation in the tropical Andes mountains that was prepared by the UN Environment and its collaborating center, Grid Arenal, and the Consortium for the Sustainable Development of the Andean Ecoregion, CONDESAN, that happens to be also acts as our pro tempore secretary. Let me just say that the climate in the Andes varies greatly depending on latitude, altitude, and proximity to the sea. The southern section in Chile and Argentina is rainy and very cold. The central section, Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador, is dry, and the northern Andes are typically rainy and warm, with delighted average spring temperatures in Colombia. Regarding climate change, the clearest trends in the tropical Andes is the increase in air temperature. According to some studies, the tropical Andes are expected to experience some of the most drastic change in climate in South America. But nevertheless, and despite such studies on recent climate variability, many information remains anecdotal and observational. The climate change in the Andes Mountains. The expected changes in total annual precipitation are generally low and certain in South America as a whole. However, models predict that in a high emission scenario, there will be significant changes for some sub-areas. In general, wet areas will get wetter, and dry areas will mostly get drier. Other issues to be highlighted, let me see, no. Other issues to be highlighted in the climate change impacts in the Andean Mountains is obviously the loss of ecosystem services, for instance, the melting of glaciers. Nowadays, the best evidence of climate change acting as an early warning system are the glaciers. Also, droughts and damages to tropical mountain forests. Climate change may increase extreme events in the Andes, such as droughts, heat and cold waves, or intense rainfall events as we have had in the last year in the Huaycos in Peru and the rainfall in Chile. Perhaps certain characteristics of the tropical Andean ecosystem makes them uniquely vulnerable to climate change. And major changes are being predicted for páramos, that these ecosystems that are based in part on their island-like distribution and highly endemic biota. And regarding risks and vulnerabilities in other sectors, I would rather say that mountain regions are characterized, as Andrew said, by inaccessibility, fragility, marginality, and people in many mountain regions often face poverty and lack of access to basic services, and the Andes, of course, it's no exception to this. Very briefly, let me move into the Andean Mountain Initiative. It's a technical and political network that brings together representatives of these 7 Andean states once a year. Formally, it was born in 2007 in Tucumán, Argentina, under the framework of the Mountain Partnership, and it acts as a regional platform integrated by our countries in order to generate and strengthen a regional dialogue space aimed to the implementation of articulated actions in the region that allow to maintain the country's collaboration in sustainable mountain development. Here we have some photographs of our last gathering in Bogotá, in Colombia, on the margins of an international gathering or meeting on páramos last July. Basically, we put there the main purpose of the Andean Mountain Initiative, that unite us in the articulation of several actions, strategies, and policies that are being implemented in the mountain areas of the Andean countries in order to achieve an adequate complementation of resources, and with the aim of designing and implementing comprehensive mountain policies. Obviously, the aim is to meet once a year, but after the meeting we had in Bogota, we will meet once more by the end of this month during the International Congress on Climate Change and its impact that will take place in Huaraz in Peru, and organized by the Geological Society of Peru. And we will gather there to exchange our experiences and progresses concerning mountain ecosystems and facilitate exchange between the mountain committees. We have in each country a national mountain committee. And within the framework of our initiative, we aim to establish new strategies for institutional improvements on national as well as on regional levels. Being from Chile, I can only talk with more authority about the progress achieved by my country, being the first in the region who has worked in a national policy towards the mountain sustainability. And we are encouraging other members of the initiative to move forward by the way of example. Nowadays, briefly let me tell you that Chile is working in answering more than 3,000 comments in a public consultation process to our draft document on the national policy for the sustainable management of mountains in Chile and an action plan to 2030. And it has been a very hard work because we have a lot of institutions being involved, about 15 institutions, but also has been a great opportunity because the inputs that we are receiving are well noted and the majority added to the second and last draft of the policy. And that has received much attention from the academia, NGOs, and civil society. Basically, what we have done in the initiative, we have seek for opportunities, meaning trying to link our countries as a regional platform, implementing transboundary actions, and scaling up and down policies. So basically, we want to share practices on SMDs and strengthen links. We want to search for a regional approach. We want to promote actions at a national level. And we want to gain a regional representation to regional and global decision-making instances. And finally, we came up with a strategic agenda on climate change adaptation that was created by us, the Andean countries, with the support of the UN Environment and CONDESAN. And we identified 10 objectives for adaptation in the Andes with concrete measures to achieve the goals. Among them, obviously, vulnerable groups, water resources, mountain ecosystems, and regional cooperation. Regarding time constraints, I would very much like to stop here, but indeed, I wish that we can have more and more side events. I know that you are putting forward another event on Thursday. Yeah. So what we want is to really move up the ladder in terms of focusing on mountains and converge them in the attention of the COP. Thank you very much, Andrew.
I think we need to move briskly through the agenda because it's rather full. But I did want to ask Don Isauro, Ambassador Isauro, one brief question, which is that as I can see by the size of the audience in the room, we struggle to gain attention the way so many other really important other environmental issues do. And I wondered if you had any perspectives. I mean, there are many reasons why mountains deserve a really enormous magnitude of attention because of their importance in terms of water, vulnerability, and the various things that you've just reviewed. Are there any lessons that you've seen from your work in ocean systems that should inform the mountain community as we endeavor to raise greater attention to these issues?
Well, it's interesting. Is this on? Yes. Yes. Sorry. The first thing, using as a parallel the ocean, we tried to obtain a political commitment within COP, and as such, in COP21, we launched an initiative that's called Because the Ocean, that it was sponsored by Chile, France, and Monaco, where because of the ocean, we raised awareness of how to move forward within the negotiations of climate change. I recall on that occasion, obviously there was a big fuss. We put it up, the Because the Ocean initiative, in a boat in the Seine with several presidents. I recall the French government was there, Ségolène Royal, and about 30 nations, they subscribed this political commitment. And then we launched Because the Ocean initiative #2. And even in this COP, we have been having more and more support from countries, and we have managed to reach 40 nations in this Because the Ocean initiative. So perhaps a political commitment, although it might not be binding, it might be useful to start the process, to ignite the process. Yeah. And then we can look for ways to follow up. For instance, in this COP23, yesterday, for instance, we had a side event, informal dinner, where we invited some presidents. The Palau president was there. The special envoy for the oceans, that happens to be from Fiji, was there. Yeah. We had Minister of Environment. So we want to, NGOs, of course, they were there, civil society. So we want to come up with ideas how to put within the framework of the NDCs, the oceans. So perhaps maybe starting with a political commitment, a group of nations can put forward an initiative like what we have done in oceans, and then from there on move forward. If we can include oceans in the next NDCs, it would be a major achievement.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I think that's actually a good preface to some of the other talks coming along. And I thank our speakers for their discipline up to now. And so our next speaker here is Joop Spijker from the UIAA, the Mountain Protection Commission of the International Climbing and Mountain Federation. And he will be discussing a range of mountaineering and climate change challenges with a very, very interesting presentation. So please, come up here.
Thank you. No problem. Yes, maybe, thank you, Andrew. Maybe I can start with the picture at the left. When it goes on to put climate change in the picture in Europe. In the mountains, you can see climate change at work. Here you see this summer in August, the peaks Tsingalo had a big rockfall, and 8 hikers died in Switzerland, and also the village down under in the valley was complete full with debris. So maybe with this kind of pictures we can raise awareness politically also to put mountains as an important issue at the COP. My name is, in Dutch, it's Joop Spijker. In English, most times Joop. I have been for 25 years mountain touring guide for the Dutch Alpine Club, and I'm involved in mountain protection. I live at the foot of a big mountain in Holland. The mountain is the Wageningse Berg. I think it's about 30 meters high. So we don't have mountains in Holland, but we have lots of people from Holland who are going to the Alps and other mountain regions to enjoy the mountains. The content of my speech will be short, 10 minutes. I show some effects on mountains and mountaineers. I show the adaptations and mitigation what's done by the national mountain federations. And I concentrate on the Alps in Europe. And I will be very short, because of the time, on the activities of the Mountain Protection Commission, but I'll show you what we are doing. Here you can see the change of glaciers in the Alps. About 75% of the ice has been gone since 1850. It's partly a natural process, the end of the Little Ice Age, which was happened in the 17th and 18th century. But after 1950, this loss of ice is mostly because of climate change. And you can see in some valleys the glaciers are completely or almost completely gone. This is Austria. And also for mountaineers, the lack of ice changes the routes, and because rocks are getting unstable, it's much difficult and more dangerous to go on certain mountains. And Arnoud Temme, who's on this photograph, has made a study on descriptions in mountain guide books of the Swiss Alps. And then you see in the descriptions 50, 60 years ago, routes were completely safe, and now it can be very dangerous to go there. So the mountains are getting more dangerous. And of course, a mountaineer can stay in the valley, but it can also have problems down for the people who live in mountain areas. Here you see also complete changes of ice walls. At the left you see the Landspitze in 1920. At the right you see the same mountain in 2012. You see lots of ice have been gone, and the forms of climbing are changing. You can't go ice climbing there anymore. It's now mixed climbing. But climate change has also effects in the valley. This is a car accident. It was a Belgian driver on the Gotthard Road, and 2,000 meters higher up, presumably because of permafrost, which is disappearing, rocks came down 2,000 meters and fell on the way. So it's also in the valley it can be very dangerous. And here you see in 1993 the river Rhone in Switzerland has had a very high level, because during summertime there was lots of precipitation, more as usual, climate change. And also, even above 3,000 meters, the precipitation was rain and not snow. That's also climate change. And so you can have this things happen in the Alps. Also for mountaineering associations, they have to do lots of investments for change. Here you see a mountain cabin. Above you see the situation till the middle of the 60s. But this mountain cabin was built on a moraine, and the glacier got away. Down under you see the changes in the glacier later. But because of the glacier went away, the moraine got unstable. So they had to build a new head. And in euros nowadays, it was an investment of about 4 million euros to be made by a sport association. So lots of money. At this point, this is the Trift Glacier, also in Switzerland. I walked there 11 years ago. At that time, the lake just started. I walked still on the glacier, but on the picture is now a lake. And the Alpine Club had to make a bridge to connect a pass to the mountain cabin. What's at the end of the picture, you can't see it, but that's the only way to get there. So also, it costs lots of money. You have, of course, a spectacular bridge, but climate change is a big problem for the mountain huts. You have also another problem, that is water scarcity. Water is, of course, very important, and many huts are dependent on a snow field or a small glacier, and sometimes these glaciers are gone by climate change. This hut had to be abandoned by the beginning of August, and then the tourist season in Italy starts. So it's a big problem for mountain federations, this kind of things. And mountain federations take also lots of action in mountain in climate mitigation. Some huts are even carbon neutral, and many huts have water power, some have wind power, and you see at the right side above, lots have also electric power by sun, solar power. And also very important, alone in Germany, there are about 800,000 members of mountain federations. In Holland we have about 60,000. Worldwide there are some millions. The mountain federation asks people to take action to reduce their carbon footprint, to go by public transport to the Alps, and so on. But of course it's very difficult to raise awareness, but we try. Do we have some 2-3 minutes for the actions of our Mountain Protection Commission?
Very quickly.
Okay, very quickly. We have a Mountain Protection Commission here. We are gathered in Bern this year. And we, maybe the history of mountaineering and mountain science is starts at the same moment. Mountaineers were the first glaciologists. Here you see Agassiz, who climbed the mountain there, but also was the first person who found out that glaciers were streaming. We have 3 objectives and actions: innovation, awareness and education, and advocacy. Innovation, that then is important, the Mountain Protection Awards. Awareness and education, we have the Respect the Mountains project. For instance, we go with tourists into the mountains and clean the mountains and tell about the dangers of climate change and all things like that. And of course, we do also a lot of advocacy. And we are here at this side event, but we are working with other partners for the good of the mountains in the world. I think I can finish now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so thanks very much for a very, very interesting presentation. And our next speaker is Grammenos Mastrojeni. He is Assistant Director General, Coordinator for the Environment of the Italian Development Corporation. And he is also Vice Chair of the Steering Committee of the Mountain Partnership, and he and I have worked often together to advance mountain issues. And so it's my delight to ask him to come up and discuss the Mountain Partnership's framework for action and other matters. Thank you very much. Bas.
Well, thank you very much. It's already kind of late at night, so I'll try to keep it short and simple. As Italy, we will be participating to the mountains events because this year in Italy we will have one big mountain event, the Mountain Partnership International Meeting, and also the celebration of the Mountain Day at FAO in Rome. This is not to talk about celebrations. There will be slides passing that give you some hints, but I will not follow them. Today, this year, on the 11th of December, there will be this big mountain gathering in Rome, and it will be about one crucial goal. So far, if you see the climate negotiations, there are some territories that are particularly exposed and fragile that have managed to make their point. If you see it not only from the ecosystem point of view, but also from the point of view of human interests, climate change becomes particularly dangerous there where ecosystem fragility overlaps societal fragility. And we have basically 5 kind of areas where this is happening. One is the Arctic, drylands, islands, forests, and mountains. As a country, we are trying to foster an alliance among these 5 territories. But the one weak image throughout the climate negotiations is the one of the mountains. And there is a reason to it. The other 4 areas are kind of overlap also a national identity. There are drylands countries, there are islands countries, Arctic countries. Mountains, although, if I'm not mistaken, they're more than 22% of Earth's emerged surfaces, they are distributed among countries. There are very few countries that consider mountains their identity. And this has led to not being able of really putting up the mountain issue on the agenda of climate change. But are mountains less important? They are not. 913 million people living there, and they live totally connected with a fragile ecosystem, which, on top of everything, is not a pristine ecosystem. It's an ecosystem that has been developed together with man. If climate change strikes there, you have a huge migration potential. Everybody starts to be concerned with migrations caused by climate change. Estimates are that if we have a really pessimistic sea level rise, 1.5 meters, there will be the movement of 450 million people. But if you look at the fragility of mountain ecosystems, it is highly likely that if things go wrong, the potential from the mountains is higher. And when people go away from the mountains, actually, the whole system of ecosystem services which are served to the valleys crumbles down. What does it mean? I mean, let's take man out of the picture for a moment. It is forecasted, as it has been said, that glaciers will melt. But glaciers do not only have their beauty on the mountains that we will regret, they also serve a function, and it is an essential function for the plains. Imagine the moment in which the Himalaya and Pamir glaciers will melt. Their function there is to act as regulators of a constant output of water towards the valleys. They are the sources of a system of river that irrigates plains where 1.4 billion people live. When they melt, they will not melt gradually according to and in proportion with temperature rise. There will be tipping points. I won't explain here why, but believe me, glaciers lubrication is going to make it that when we reach a certain temperature, Himalayan glaciers simply collapse. And so we have to ask ourselves, so what? So what? It means that the plains around the Himalaya will have their agriculture destroyed by an alternance of floods and drought. And if you see the potential of destabilization of such a situation, we see how dangerous it is. So why are we trying to gather all mountain entities, states, NGOs, study centers, think tanks, within the Mountain Partnership to build an alliance, and in Rome to do one thing, to launch together a call for action for mountains, which has been too long neglected if we consider the amount of risk that everybody is going to face because of neglecting the mountains. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grammenos, for, as always, an inspiring talk and really calling attention to the need for action for mountains. So our next speaker is a dear friend of mine, Tshering Sherpa, who is the chairperson for the Climate Alliance of Himalayan Communities from Nepal. And he'll be providing community perspectives on climate change in the Himalayas. So please, come to the fore, and here you go. Yep.
Okay, so
It's the green one for forward.
Forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there you go. And you can see it over here.
Yeah. Namaste, Tashidele, and very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tshering Sherpa. I'm a community leader in the Khumbu region of Nepal, which houses the world's tallest peak, Mount Everest. I have been in mountaineering and tourism business last 43 years, and I have been a witness to the vast changes to the lives, livelihood and the environment in the Himalayas over the last 5 decades. I have the following to report. Yes. Mountaineering and tourism has done a wonder to the lives of the communities in the Mount Everest region by bringing economic benefits and development opportunities denied to us for centuries due to our isolation. However, in recent years, climate change has been creating tremendous problems to the lives and ecology, as well as the cultural heritage and lives. Of course, we, the mountain communities across the Himalayas, are concerned, very, very concerned. People living in the Himalayas may have similar pains and pleasures, but they are very diverse in terms of ethnicity, language, culture, and traditional values. This is very important, however, to bring together all the voices of mountain communities under one umbrella organization. I therefore co-founded the Climate Alliance of Himalayan Communities, and I have the privilege to lead this organization as its chairperson. Now I would like to capture my speech on my own experiences and the experiences of my fellow mountain communities across the Nepal's Himalayas. Ladies and gentlemen, small and big glacial lakes have come up across the Himalayas. Many of them have now become dangerously big. One of the biggest of them, Imja Cho, perhaps you may know, this is one of the most talked glacial lake, which is situated at 5,010 meters. I saw developing in front of my own eyes since my childhood. This huge glacial lake came about literally on a playground where me and my friends used to play while we are grazing our yaks. Let's note that all of the Himalayas are sitting on one of the most unstable and seismically active ecological landscape with earthquake, a regular phenomenon. Yes, this is the huge lake which we used to play well while we are childhood, and now this lake became almost 3 kilometers long, 1 kilometer wide, and more than 142 meters deep. Subsequently, Mount Everest has a major effects on the livelihood of not only the mountain communities of Nepal, but majority of the population of Asia. Mount Everest is regarded as the goddess mother of the universe in Sherpa folklore. We think that Mount Everest is massive, solid, unchanging, strong, lofty, mighty, unable to be hurt. But the truth is few people knows that the home of Sagarmatha, mother of the universe, Chomolungma, goddess mother of the universe, is one most endangered place on earth. There were about 3,000 glaciers in the high Himalayas. Today, in the last 50 years, today, almost there are as many glacial lakes have been formed. Less immediately noticeable at low altitude, the urgency is in the high Himalayas, now emerging one of the world's most vulnerable and quickly disintegrating place due to climate change. Unfortunately, the glaciers are not the only problem. Temperature increasing has brought a whole lot of problems for us. The mountain communities in the Himalayas, the mosquitoes that used to limit to the tropical and subtropical has moved up, bringing diseases to the communities that were never explored to them. Flash floods, landslide, avalanches, forest fires are becoming much more common and intense. Massive amount of immigration is happening to lowlands and neighboring countries because of all these problems. Climate change, which we hardly made any negative contribution towards, is damaging to our very culture and very identity. If something is not done big and quick enough, the millennium-old heritage from which the whole world could have benefited would be totally lost. Coming from mountaineering business community, having known to almost all the famous climbers of the world, I would like to share that because of the global warming, the entire mountaineering sports is in danger because it is increasingly becoming dangerous and uncertain. Ladies and gentlemen, the iconic image of Mount Everest has been affected by a series of consecutive disasters. The deaths of the 16 valiant high-altitude Sherpas on Khumbu Icefall avalanche of Mount Everest on 18 April 2014, and unprecedented natural catastrophe of heavy snow and avalanches that occurred on 13 and 14 October 2014 in the Annapurna, Dhaulagiri, and Dolpo region, killed 41 and rescued 532 trekkers and climbers of various nationalities. The devastating earthquake of 25th April 2015 has triggered a massive avalanche from the flanks of Mount Pumari to Mount Everest base camp that killed 18 and rescued 71 climbers immediately from Everest base camp to Kathmandu, where some of the worst climbing disasters in the Himalayan mountaineering history. The earthquake of April and May, followed by more than 500 aftershocks, has brought us unspeakable grief and devastation. The question is, what could be done? How can we, the local people, the mountain communities, help this situation? How can the wider, more importantly, how can the wider world, people in the audience, help this situation which is going to be out of control? I will take 2 minutes to make some of my recommendations. The mountaineering, we, the mountain community, must come together, share experiences, raise our voice locally, regionally, and globally. With this in mind, the organization which I head, Climate Alliance of Himalayan Community, is constituted, and we hope that we can do something for the betterment of the lives and livelihood of the mountain communities from the effects of climate change. And we need the institutional support to build our capacity, be able to do the awareness and advocacy work that we are trying to pursue. The second, we, based on our limited knowledge, have come about a model of promoting smart, climate-smart villages in the mountain areas. The model is built around 3 pillars: climate awareness, climate adaptation, mitigation of greenhouse gas emission. We have selected few sites to pilot such projects. We need the technical and financial support of the global communities to make this happen. Our idea is to propagate, to have an idea across Nepal's Himalayas on the 1,555-kilometer Great Himalayan Trail, because in Nepal, the community-based development model have been very, very successful. Just to share one example, the community forest model has only piloted at a few places, but it was so successful and it spread across the country. This type of initiative has increased the overall forest cover of the country itself. With these few words, I would like to conclude my presentation here. I thank you for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation, and I'm grateful for Tshering for bringing up the model of community forestry, which is actually a jewel for natural resource management that Nepal has really taken very far forward as a model for many other parts of the world, despite the many other problems that that country faces. It's a marvelous example of communities managing a natural resource sustainably. So for our final speaker now, except for the wrap-up comments, I'm very pleased to have Mr. Ümit Turhan, who is the Division Chief for the Ministry of Forestry and Water Affairs of the Government of Turkey. And he will be discussing national action to address climate change issues in mountain areas of Turkey. And I would add that he actually in particular is a forestry specialist, not so much a water specialist, but I think we'll learn about both sets of issues during his presentation. So I thank you very much for sharing Turkey's experience with some of these issues. Thank you. Ümit, please.
Good evening, everyone. Please get my voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank for Mountain Partnership Alliance under the FIO for hosting such a timely event on the mountain. I also thanks for the distinguished speakers making interesting, informative speeches. I am happy to have this chance to talk about to you very briefly. I know we have limited time to about national actions addressing climate change impacts in the mountain areas. Turkey, with a privileged position to continents located in the three biogeographical regions, European, Siberian, Iran, Turhan, and Mediterranean, and also settled within the Alp-Himalaya Oceanic belt. That's quick. Yeah. Let's move on to our geographical part. Turkey's magnificent mountains and forests are mostly undeveloped, existing as wonderful natural preserves for an extraordinary variety of wildlife. We have two of Turkey's most famous peaks. One is settled in the inner part of the Anatolia, is called Erciyes Mountain, is about around 4,000 meters, and the highest one is located in the eastern part of the Turkey, Mountain Ararat. As you see, these some areas which is dark black brown is the highest mountain is settled in the Anatolia, and over the 60% of the country has slope more than 50%. I can give us some facts and figures about the Turkey geographical station. Above the map shows that the precipitation range of the Turkey around 600 millimeter annually in Turkey, but you see the northern part of the Turkey area is received high precipitation, which is around between 200 millimeters and 2,500 millimeters. And above the map shows that as a meteorological annually drought map, the dark black area shows the extremely drought area. You know, you see the black dark area, inner part of the Anatolia, and eastern part of the Anatolia is suffer from the drought. And also the biggest city of the Turkey, Istanbul, Izmir, and Ankara also exposed the drought. Let's move to what are the achievement initiatives to tackle with the climate change? Carry out some project implemented in our country, and also some national plans managed by state. And very shortly, I can address some activities on climate change. What are the investments on the natural sources to be improving? There are some activities. You see one of the important one is the afforestation activities. Within 14 years, around 3.7 billion seedlings were planted on the upland area. As you see, the works for the terracing activities, afforestation and reforestation activities within the mountain areas. Maybe recognize them with some women's. Women make a specific contribution to forestry and agroforestry value chains. These are important for their incomes and in turn for well-being and food security of their households. The other important issue is the landslide control works, managed by also state-related ministry, Water and Forest Affairs, Ministry of Agricultural and Environmental Ministries. This is my hometown in Trabzon, is located in the Black Sea region. You see the very slope area. The houses is far from one to another, and you see the some areas exposed to erosion control to make some terraces by machine or human power. Above the picture, to prevent the rock mass, to tracing fence. And the other activities is also avalanche control activities. The same area, the upperland area, to protect the rural development and to perform the avalanche control activities, to set up wind buffers and fences. And as for the some investment in the rural development, rural people, through the project carry out to state force service to invest in some irrigation systems and also rehabilitation of soil channels, drip irrigation into field, livestock, drinking water access point, and also some horticultural activities, as you see, to set up a pool, orchard, production, vegetables under the plastic tower. Let's move on to the other instrument of the improve the livelihood, to expansion of energy saving technologies and solar energy systems for hot water installation for village houses, energy-saving heaters, common use open stone baker ovens. The state agency to give the rural people as a grant and credit to distribute it to such kind of technologies. And the other important activities is also education and consciousness activities, also in the frame of the natural conservation management activities, education and awareness raising activities are carrying out the marketing of products. Lastly, I can give us some facts related to forest villages because it's very important in our country. Around 7 million people live in forest villages. Around 40% of the rural people consist of the forest villagers. Forest villagers and cooperatives are deal with the production, harvesting facilities, transportation and afforestation activities. Then state forest service provide a grant and credit to manage such kind of activities. And by this way, around 700,000 forest villagers has been raised for their life quality. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you very much, Ümit, for the presentation. Okay, so now we've got time for just a couple of questions. But before that, I wanted to just say a couple of things. We've had a We've had quite a few people who've actually requested to speak here who we weren't able to give slots to. And I wanted to call particular attention to Kyrgyzstan, which is a NGO in Nepal, which convened a meeting this past October in Jumna, Nepal, one of the poorest parts of the country, to launch a call for action to amplify the voice of poor, marginalized, and excluded communities at international, regional, national, and local levels, which is totally in line with the objectives of this session. So not only do we have from the international arena the Mountain Partnership calling for action at this level, but even at local levels, for instance, in Nepal, there's a similar call. So mountain communities to the international community, the issues are recognized. So I would like now to open the floor to just a couple of questions before we go into closing statements. I'm delighted to have a question from a woman in the audience, please. Do we have a...
Okay, thank you. My name is Klara Bekkulova. I am a project coordinator of the German-Kyrgyz research project on mountain forests. So we are also aware that mountain forests are the most vulnerable ecosystems. So my question is, small island states are similarly underrepresented, and Fijian government had made tremendous work. So we can see the COP23 are now called as Fiji and focused as Fiji. Should mountainous countries follow the similar track? What are the main challenges and limitations? Maybe what kind of political steps should be taken? That's the main question I wanted to discuss. Thank you.
I think that's an ideal question for Grammenos from the Italian government to address.
Yes, I start not agreeing totally because islands did a tremendous job in making their problems be visible in the agenda. There is no competition between islands and mountains, to the point that we are trying to have the steering committees of the Mountain Partnership and of the Global Island Partnership together. We are acting to link them, etc. They have a lot in common, in the sense that they are politically not necessarily strong actors that have a very high stake. What did they do different? They talked to people and to the media. people started realizing what was happening with islands when they had such wonderful ideas like having a council of ministers underwater. But why were they stronger? I mentioned it while I talked, because not all islands are island states, but many of them are island states. So you have a national identity that clearly cares for something. The problem with mountains, again, is that there are a few states that have their own identity totally defined by the fact that they are mountain states, but there are not so many. And also they are, say, the geographical and cultural situations are very different. Not that islands, I mean, have so much in common if you take an Arctic island and a Pacific island, but still insularity is, how would I say, a stronger identity reference. That's why, carried on by small island developing states that took the flag, they were able to put their points so high on the agenda. Now it is the time that we find a formula for mountains to do so too. It is difficult because Rwandan mountains are just as important as the Alps, which are just as important as the Andes, which are just as important as the Himalaya. If you take it quantitatively, but this doesn't really make sense. So, you know, the mountains are more important than forests. So the ecosystem is one. But we have to find some identity to put forward. This is what we will be trying to do in Rome. But it is really time to raise the voice of mountain communities. And it is difficult because mountain communities are not necessarily states, except that all this process has gone a long way in giving voices to actors which are not states. So, let us get together.
Thank you very much.
Can I add
Tshering, yes.
a few more things? The tsunami which happens in the islands or sea can recover very fast, whereas the disasters and tsunamis which happen in the mountain region takes to recover decades, maybe even centuries, due to inaccessible and fragile landscape. That is the difference between the islands and the mountains. Thank you.
That's actually a remarkable point. I've seen areas impacted by the tsunami in Sri Lanka, for instance, and the natural coastline has been coming back extraordinarily fast. That doesn't happen in mountains to the same extent. Any other comments on this really good, interesting question? Isauro?
Thank you very much, Andrew. I absolutely agreed with the idea of developing an identity associated with, obviously, with mountains. The remarkable example of Fiji putting forward an agenda that is associated to oceans. I hope that it can be replicated if we are able, perhaps through the call of action in Rome, or perhaps through a political coalition of countries that they really raise awareness about the issue. The paradox is that, for instance, I'm representing here the Andean Initiative, is that half of our population is associated to mountains, and perhaps the people in these large cities that are in the plateau of the Andes, they don't associate the climate change to this environment, mountains. So indeed, there is a challenge, as I mentioned before. Maybe we should look for a political commitment. I don't know if the call for action in Rome might be that, a vehicle that where we can follow up.
I hope so.
Yeah. So we hope, sincerely, we hope that for the upcoming COPs, the mountains can really reach a center stage.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think because the time is moving quite along, and I think we need some wrap-up remarks, I will say just one thing, though. We're going to have a similar meeting at the same time on Thursday to this, and I encourage all of you, it's going to be focused on both mountains and islands, so bringing these two topics together, and I encourage each of you to bring at least 10 people each, which can be particularly concerned about the mountain side of the equation, because I think there'll be plenty of people people concerned about islands. So with that, we've got final closing remarks to kind of capture some of the lessons from today by Mr. Chencho Norbu, who is the Secretary of the National Environment Commission of the Royal Government of Bhutan. And so I'm very much looking forward to his thoughts and guidance. He's been to many climate change meetings and has a lot of experience over the years. So I look forward to wisdom from the mountains of Bhutan to close our session here. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Before I do some sum up, I mean, so much of rich information has been shared. Let me briefly speak out my own interest and what I have been doing it. Where I live is around 2,300 meters above sea level. And the highest pass that I've crossed is around 5,300. That is the highest pass I crossed. And I'm quite passionate about photography. And I love those mountains. But I feel sad when you see the loss of glaciers within just a decade. I have seen my own eyes, and I have a photograph to compare. So things are changing rapidly in our mountain ecosystems, but we tend to realize slow. Things are moving fast. It's not only the donors. I think even at the local level, sometimes we take things for granted. By the time you realize, it's gone. You cannot recall or put it back. So we have to live with this one. So that is really the scenario at the local level. Having said that, let me not really sum up, give a thought on what has been presented, because there's so much of information, so much of experience that you have within a short period of time is being shared. So that was really wonderful. But what I could guess out of this presentation, so much of rich information has been shared passionately by each speaker. Now, intent behind that is to really center stage the mountain in the international global forum or fora. That is the motive that we are driving. Now, there's a lot of evidence. Now, we don't have to question about it. The pictorial presentations from Nepal, from Europe, Alps, and this, how fast the glaciers are retreating. And at the community level, at that level, we don't have a local solution. We cannot do anything. That's the reality. That's why we need a global community to look into the mitigation part, the emission reduction part. That is one. Now, the impact, if you look at it, how it is affecting our ecosystems, how it is affecting our livelihood, how it is affecting our biodiversity. But when you talk of biodiversity, the problem, what we have in many mountainous countries is we are not able to assess what do we really have. I mean, we do not have that capacity or resources to carry on. And it's very difficult for us to talk to our political leaders, talk to our donors, when we do not have a basic information right. So in order to argue, to put forward our agenda, I think information, reliable data is key for us to convince. Even when you go and ask a budget to your finance ministry, those informations are important, then they only believe that it isn't important. So that is something that we need to look at it. Now, every speaker actually calls for action. Every speaker calls for attention of our partners at all levels. How do we bring this to the attention of our partners, particularly at the climate change? Now, my own thinking, when I was asked to, do some closing thought on that, I just started looking back. Where do we have the foundation saying that mountain issues are pertinent? It has been realized. I am sure many of you must have seen that document, The Future We Want. In Brazil, 2012, when the heads of the states, leaders came together, I was amazed to see there are 3 paras. Para 210, 211, 212. In these paras, what you all have discussed about the conservation, about the food security, about this glacial retreat, impact is very clearly done. What is not been reflected there, I saw is new idea came is tourism, the opportunities. So I see there is a potential for us to move this agenda forward. And I'm very happy that Italian government is doing that. Now, one specific attention that I want to draw is experience from Chile. Having that national policy, trying to mainstream into your local sustainable development. Now, if you look at in that future we want, that exactly says that to mainstream the policy into the sustainable development. I thought that is a wonderful thing to do. And having said that, let me also say that it's really key for us to start from local, from your own national level. How can we influence our leaders, our policymakers, our politicians, the importance of this mountain agenda? Now, if we can convince them, if we can drive them, they have all the opportunity to speak the same language. And if all our leaders, our ministers speak the language, I don't think anyone can stop us. So this is key for us to, in my view, to move us forward. And I'm sure that it's possible. It's a matter of time. It's coming together as we did here. So I'm very hopeful that from December, when leaders meet there, I hope that it will be a different story. Probably this hall will be filled up when we meet in COP24. So with that note, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
So I wanted to thank the panelists, and I wanted to thank all of you for coming today. And it's been a wonderful session. And yes, please.
Yep, can I just make a very one quick comment on behalf of our delegation? Coincident that I'm also from Kyrgyzstan. So basically, similar initiatives are drawing attention of the countries to similar initiatives. Kyrgyzstan has been a champion in snow leopard conservation, and just this year there has been a World Summit on snow leopard in Bishkek. And considering that many of the partners here also share same borders and same ideas for biodiversity, and especially snow leopard, we would like to also reconfirm, first of all, our commitment to such regional networks, but then see how mountain partnerships as this one and existing regional initiatives driven by the countries, of course, can be linked together and can work for the same and common purpose. So that's something also for us to explore. And we know, for example, Bhutan and Nepal and other countries who are present here, we share the same ideas and same beliefs, because snow leopard is a litmus paper of healthy mountain ecosystems with all the problems that have been under discussion here, and solutions can be common for not just the issues being discussed here, but also to protect our rare animals through biodiversity and other vulnerable hotspots. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any other panelists want to say anything else?
Perhaps the fact that Bhutan, that has the happiest people on earth, has something to do with the mountains. Maybe you should tell us the recipe, and maybe this association might work well.
Okay, well, thank you all for a nice evening. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you for this. That was great. Thank you very much.